everybody, welcome to our September Let's Paint Live. My name is Emma Panufsky, and today we are going to be painting Portrait of Odette, which is going to be a really sweet fall-inspired painting, and I am extra excited about this paint night tonight because we're going to be using one of our brand new products, Folk Art Super Thick. If you haven't heard of it before, it's a really beautiful, super heavy-bodied acrylic paint in the Folk Art line, which we love. And it creates really beautiful, voluminous texture to your painting. So I'm really excited to talk about that tonight and show you guys how to incorporate it into your painting. But other than that, I think we're ready to get started. So, like always, you're going to want to have your Folk Art Let's Paint Live kit. That it comes with a beautiful assortment of Folk Art 2-ounce acrylic paints. And it also comes with a 10-piece artist variety brush set, which we're going to be using tonight. You want to have a 10-inch stretched circle canvas, just like the one I have here. We have the star of the show, our Folk Art Super Thick. So for this painting, we're going to be working with leafy green and white. And then specifically from the Let's Paint Live color palette, we're going to be using daffodil yellow, navy blue, aqua, pure orange, coffee bean, classic green, thicket, black, and wicker white. So I have my brushes, I have my water basin, my palette paper, my paper towels, everything is good to go. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is put some aqua onto our palette here. I'm going to take my 3/4 inch flat brush and I'm going to base coat the whole canvas here. And of course it wouldn't be a Let's Paint Live if I didn't forget to bring something.
What you need?
That hair dryer right over there, Harrison, if you don't mind.
That's what I'm here for.
That's a good segue though. If you guys have any questions tonight about anything that I'm doing or a color I used, or if you just want to say hey, let us know where you're painting from, make sure to comment that down in the chat. Harrison's going to be moderating it and answering your questions if you have any, and just saying hi to you guys. So make sure you're chatting in the chat.
What color was that you're base coating with?
Right, so this is aqua that we're base coating with.
Aqua, okay.
Isn't it pretty?
I like that.
Yeah. So you'll notice there's not a lot of aqua in our finished piece over here. This is just going to be an underpainting, which will give us a really rich, saturated color in the end. It's a great technique that I like to personally incorporate in a lot of my paintings. Makes you, you know, if you're kind of a bit of a perfectionist like me when you're painting or DIYing, it allows you to kind of sit back a little bit and turn that part of your brain off, because you don't have to fill everything in, because you have that beautiful undercoat that'll really carry a lot of it for you. All right, so I'm rinsing my brush. And I'm grabbing my blow dryer. If you guys have a blow dryer at home to just help speed things along, or if you have a heat gun, both of those will work great. I'm going to go ahead and dry our canvas. It's stronger than I thought it was going to be.
Oops.
Okay. All right, once your canvas is nice and pretty much dry, I'm going to take a piece of chalk or a pencil, whatever you have on hand. I'm going to be using some chalk, I think. And we're going to go ahead and mark off our horizon line for our painting. So the horizon line in this one, you can see in our finished piece here, it's about 1/3 of the way down our canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and just sketch a straight line. Does not have to be perfect. Going across our canvas just like that. Okay? All right. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some white to our palette there. And taking my 1/2-inch brush, dip it into your white, and we're going to paint the upper part of our canvas with the white. So this is kind of what I was talking about before. Since we have that underpainting of the aqua, we don't have to worry about fully saturating our sky with white, because that's part of the process. We want to see some of that aqua shining through. So if it's not totally white, don't feel like you need to go ahead and give it a second coat. It's going to work in our favor that you can see some of this aqua coming through the white.
That's like magic. That's so cool.
Right? Okay, so if you're base coating like me and you have some of these little streaks from where your brush started and stopped, you can just go from right to left all the way across the ends of our canvas to just flatten those out. So we have something like this. Okay, so I'm going to rinse my brush. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of navy onto our palette, not a lot, because I'm going to go back to my 3/4-inch flat brush, and it's still wet with my water basin. I'm not going to dry it off. I'm going to incorporate some of that water from our super wet brush into our navy and water that down until you have kind of like an inky consistency with your paint. It's going to be very watery. And with this navy wash, we're going to paint the bottom portion of our lake, so underneath the horizon line. Okay, so now that we have the basics of our sky and our water painted in, I'm going to rinse my brush again. And I'm going to take my blow dryer again and dry this till it's pretty dry. So next thing we're going to add to our palette is going to be some coffee bean. Again, just a little bit, not a whole lot. And I'm going to take my number 2 round brush. I'm going to dip it into my water basin. And kind of similar like we did with the navy, I'm going to incorporate my wet brush into some of that paint to water it down a little bit. Okay, offload your brush a little bit. After all that mixing, we don't need quite that much paint on our brush. And we're going to paint some trees in the background. So starting at the horizon line, we're kind of looking for like a kind of, you know, native water trees. So like think of like a marshland and how all of the vines and the trunks are kind of curvy and swerving with the natural nature. So we're going to start at the horizon line and go up to the sky. So once you have a line kind of like that, we're going to think about how trees are. They're wider at the base, and then usually they get more narrow at the top. So I'm widening that base there. And then I'm just filling in the trunk with some more brown. I'm going to do a similar thing to the right of our first tree. Going to widen the base of the tree. And the beauty of this is you can really have as many or as little, as straight or as curvy of trees as you like. Okay, so we're not going to rinse our brush yet. We're going to take a little bit of our white, just a little bit, and let it just naturally mix with the brown that's on our brush right now. So we're thinking if our light source is the sun, and the sun is coming from here, that's how it's going to be reflecting onto all of the subjects in our painting. So if the sun's here, the light's going to be on this side of the tree, it's going to be on this side of the tree, and on this side of the tree. So keeping that in mind, we have our lightish brown color that we just mixed with the brown on our brush, incorporating a little bit of white. We're just going to do a few, kind of picking up my brush and placing it back down in certain areas that I want to incorporate a little bit of light shining on our trees. So it looks something like that, just to give it a little bit more dimension. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some thicket to our palette. And very similar to how we just did our trees, I'm going to take my number 2 round brush again. My brush is very wet, and I'm going to incorporate some of that water into our thicket, just watering down the paint a little bit. Mix, mix, mix that water in. And then offload right onto my palette there. And kind of similar to how we did the trees, we're going to start our brush at the horizon line and we're going to flick up. So my brush is touching down on my canvas, and as I move up, my brush is going to come off of the canvas like that. And we're thinking of a lake here, so the grass is going to be a little bit unruly. Nobody's landscaping in this lake because it's for the birds. Just continuing to start at that horizon line and flicking up. And our grass is going to be all different heights, some shorter, some taller, growing in all different directions. And don't feel like you need to totally fill this space right here because we're not done with this space just yet. Okay, and we're not going to worry about the sides just yet because we're going to do something with that later too. All right, now I'm going to rinse my brush. And we're going to add a little bit of some more thicket to our palette paper here. And we're not going to water this down. Okay, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and dry our trees and our grass up here. Make sure it's nice and dry before our next step. All right, we're good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take our another 1/2-inch flat brush. We want to make sure that our brush is very dry. So if you're picking up a brush that was in your water basin, make sure you dry it really well with a paper towel. I'm going to dip our super dry brush into our thicket. We're not going to totally submerge, just a little bit of our thicket onto the brush. And then we're even going to offload that onto our palette so we have a really dry brush with just a little bit of thicket on it. And taking our super dry brush, I'm going to go back and forth, adding just a little bit more paint if you need it, over our grass and our trees to make the marshy area look a little bit more dense with grass and whatnot. And we're not going very much higher than, we're not going any higher than our grass. We're staying below the tips of our grass. Okay, so it kind of looks like that. I'm going to set my brush down for a second, and I'm going to take my piece of chalk and kind of do like a C stroke here, and then I'm going to mirror that on the other side and here. And we're going to take our dry green brush and we're going to fill in those areas too. Subtle shadow of green. I'm not going to worry about our blue lake as much since it's already pretty saturated with color, but we definitely want to hide some of that pretty white sky with some marshy green. Alrighty, so now I can rinse my brush. And we're going to do a little bit of color mixing. So with this color mixing that we're about to do, the goal is to just have a good spread of a variety of different greens. So one combination we're going to do that's going to look nice is mix together some thicket and some coffee bean. So about half and half. Taking my thicket and a little bit of coffee bean. Mix those two until it's well incorporated, and we're going to get a really deep, rich, sagey color with that. Okay, we're not going to rinse our brush just yet. We're going to incorporate some classic green, a new color, a lighter green than our thicket, onto the palette. It's okay that you have a little bit of a dirty brush. We're still going to get pretty greens. We're going to mix some of our classic green with some thicket. Mix that up. A little bit more thicket. Okay. Set my brush down, and we're going to add some yellow to our palette as well. So I'm going to take some yellow and some classic green. Mix, mix, mix those two together. For a really vibrant grassy green. And then I'm going to mix some of our classic green with a little bit of white. Get a pretty light green. Okay, now I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to add a little bit more thicket and classic green to our palette since we used quite a bit of it up with our mixing. And now we're going to have fun incorporating all of the different green colors that we mixed up into our piece. So I'm going to use a 1/2 inch brush. Make sure it's dry. And I'm going to start with the thicket. You can start with any color you like. And I'm just going to create vertical strokes within those lines that we made with our chalk. Just random on both sides. Okay, so for this process too, feel free to rinse your brush if you'd like to, but since we're using all greens and they're going to kind of mix together in the end anyway to create this bushy kind of background, you don't really need to rinse your brush. I'm not going to. We're just going to dabble into all those pretty greens that we mixed. Filling our bushes with different shades of green. So the goal for this is to fill up the space with all of our greens so that you can't see any more of the white sky in those areas or the blue water. You can make some strokes shorter, some strokes longer, as long as they're going up and down. And once you're nearing the end of just filling up your space, now I am on the lookout for any of those blue or those white areas that need to have some green in them. Okay, so once you're happy with your green space, I'm going to rinse my brush again. And I'm going to go ahead and dry this in place. All right. If your canvas is not totally dry, don't worry, because we're going to be working in the center section of our canvas anyway. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sketch out our swan shape. And I don't want you guys to be intimidated. It's just a bunch of basic shapes, and I'm going to walk you through it. So the first shape that we're going to sketch is an oval. So we're going to create our ovally egg shape right there. Okay, and then continuing with the oval. So, you know, the first one we did, it's kind of in the center point of our water. Now we're going to create a smaller oval, and it's going to be focusing on the horizon point a little bit further back from where our first oval started. So a smaller oval right about here. And personally, I think the beauty of working with chalk is that it's so easy to manipulate, and if you don't like what you did, you can just wipe it right off. You can use a pencil, of course, too, but this is just quicker. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect those two ovals. So starting at the back of our smaller oval, we're going to curve it around to about right there. And then parallel to that line, I'm going to make another line there, and that's going to fall at the front of our first oval. Okay? Pretty simple so far, right? And look, we basically have our swan. Now we're going to just sketch the bill of our swan. So that's just going to be kind of like a little triangle shape, rounded triangle right there. All right, easy. That's pretty much the swan. So I'm going to put my chalk down and put some more white onto my palette. And I'm going to take my 1/2-inch flat brush again, and we're going to fill in the body of our swan that we just sketched out with our wicker white. So just painting in the lines of what we just sketched. If you can draw an egg, you can draw a swan. Okay, we're not going to worry about the bill yet. And we're not going to worry about the back feathers because that is when we're going to use our super thick. The front of her looked a little puny, so I'm just going to round that out just a little bit. Okay, perfect. All right, so while excuse me, while we still have some white on our brush, I'm going to offload as much of that white as I can onto my paper towel. And right underneath the swan, I'm going to dry brush with that white. And as I come down my canvas, those strokes are going to get less wide as I come down. And that's just kind of creating a little bit of a reflection on the water. Just like that. Okay? I'm going to rinse my brush, and then if you still have some coffee bean, which I do, great. If you don't, go ahead and add some more coffee bean. I'm going to take my number 2 round brush, and I'm going to mix just the tiniest bit of coffee bean onto my number 2 round right there, and I'm going to incorporate that into our white so that we get sort of an off-white color here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow and incorporate that into the off-white mixture as well, just to kind of warm it up a little bit. So now we have this creamy color. If you have a lot on your brush like I do, go ahead and take that off with your paper towel. And we don't want to have a lot of paint on our brush, just a little bit for this next part. We're just going to create some dimension with our off-white in our swan here. So just incorporating some of this off-white into the natural curves of our swan. And since our white is still pretty wet, we are working it into that white paint. Okay, till it looks something like this. All right, I'm gonna rinse my brush. And now for some of the fun part, we're going to start to incorporate some of our super thick into our painting. So I'm really excited about this. This is a fairly new product in our folk art line. If you missed the beginning, it is a super heavy bodied acrylic paint. So the cool thing about it is you can incorporate a lot of fun texture into your pieces. So I'm just taking a palette knife, scooping some of it out of our little tub and onto my palette here. See how thick that is too? Sometimes when you work with heavy-bodied acrylics like that, once your piece dries, you'll realize that the acrylic sort of flattens out and it doesn't maintain that structure that you initially create in your piece. The great thing about this is that it really holds its shape. So if you create a lot of texture and dimension in your art pieces, it'll stay that way even when it dries, which is awesome. So if you saw on the supply list, I called for a 1/2-inch filbert brush. So I have that. I'm gonna take kind of like a scoop, almost, of our super thick. See how thick that is? I feel like I wanna do like the blizzard test when you go to Dairy Queen. Put it upside down.
Yes.
Not coming out.
Whoa.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some feathers. So starting at the back, we're going to touch down and bring it to the front of our swan. Okay. So we're going to continue that method, just kind of in rows. So we have our back row. I'm going to add about 2 more rows of these feathers. And something else that please feel free to do, I'm going to just dip just like the top of my brush into that off-white color and mix that into some of our super thick just to create a little bit of dimension within the white. And since we have put so little of that off-white mixture in here, it's not going to mess with the heavy body nature of the paint. And we're just creating those rows of feathers. Last row. Look at that texture. Isn't that cool? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush, and we're going to do something very similar to our bushes here. So I'm going to close my tub of white. I'm going to break out my leafy green that we were working, or no, we haven't worked with it yet. Our leafy green super thick. I'm going to open that. And I'm going to take my palette knife and add some of this onto our palette as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to kind of split this in half, what I just added to my palette. And I'm going to make one darker shade and one kind of lighter olivey shade. So I'm going to add just a little bit of thicket, not much, to one half here. A little bit more. To darken that up just a touch, and even a little bit of navy as well to create a really pretty deep green color. Okay, and then on the other side, I'm going to incorporate a little bit of yellow. Okay, and then moving back to our filbert brush, we're going to do very similar to how we did the feathers of our swan. I'm going to take a little scoop of one of our greens and I'm going to place it in the bush and then swipe up. Just scattered where you want to add a little bit of texture to your greenery. Okay. I'm not even going to rinse my brush. Just going to wipe it clean and switch to our other color that we mixed up. Adding some cool textural elements to our piece here. You can add as much or as little as you'd like. All right, I really like the way that's looking. So I'm going to stop now, rinse my brush, and I'm going to take this number 2 round again. And to our palette, we're going to add some pure orange, just a little bit. And with the pure orange here, we're going to finally fill in our swan's bill. All right, really quick, I'm gonna rinse my brush and blow dry really just the head of our swan. The rest can dry on its own naturally. I'm just kind of erasing some of those chalk lines. Once our whole piece is fully dry, I'll feel more confident to rub my finger everywhere, but just erasing some of those lines for now to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna add some black to my palette, just a little bit, not a lot. Oop. There we go. I'm going to take my number 2 round brush and we're going to finish the face of our sweet little swan. I'm going to water this down just a little bit, not because we want the viscosity or the opacity to change too much, but we do just want to thin it down a little bit so that it's more like painting with ink. Okay, so I'm going to create a thin curve. Just kind of noting the swan's bill there. Another little curve right there. Kind of creating like a teardrop shape here. Gonna connect these. And then we're gonna paint in the swan's eyeball. To finish her pretty face. Curve this a little bit more. And with that, we have painted Portrait of Odette. So a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. Like I said, if you have any questions or comments throughout the live stream, make sure that you commented them down below. Harrison is moderating the chat. You can buy everything that you saw here on plaidonline.com. We've made it really easy for you guys. If you search Portrait of Odette, this sweet girl will come up and you can have full access to all of the products so that you can paint this at home. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.